Hello and welcome to another edition of Rare Together, podcast series from LDA Research that explores what it's really like to live with rare diseases. I'm your host, Andrew Grant, and once again, we're joined by two very special guests who have kindly agreed to talk about their experiences. First up, we have Taylor, all the way from Santa Monica in sunny California. Hi, Taylor. How's it going?
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good afternoon for us. Good morning for you. And on the other side, we have Wendy, who is dialing in from the lovely island of Anglesey in North Wales, which I know very well. Hi, Wendy. How are you today?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks very much for joining us. So welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. We really, really do appreciate it. And firstly, what I'd like to do is find out a little bit more about both of you. So let me start with you, actually, Wendy. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us something about the rare disease or the conditions that you're suffering from, if you wouldn't mind?
Right. Well, ever since from a young age, I've been extremely hypermobile. So obviously, kids as they are, I could bang myself into all kinds of positions and everything. Oh wow, and shows you tricks. Not realizing at the time, of course, I was doing myself more harm than good. But there we go. Had my children quite young, and then I went into nursing. I was fine for quite a few years, and then I noticed that it was quite a heavy job because I was doing rehabilitation, and I found that the joint pain I was getting was becoming troublesome to the point that it's actually not allowing me to do my work to my best ability. So, being a nurse, you'd think it'd be easier to get a diagnosis, to find out what was going wrong. I found it actually worked against me. I found that doctors were taking but being presumptuous and saying, well, you're a nurse, you know these things, you're putting 2 and 2 together, coming up with 5. And I'm thinking, no. Or another classic one would be, oh, you've got 2 children under 5, you're just tired. No. And it just escalated to the point that I really started doing my own research, as you say, reading. And I'd worked it out that it was something rheumatological, musculoskeletal, but I couldn't find out exactly what. And at that time, EDS was hardly, you hadn't heard of it. You really had to scour for it. And then I got to see a lovely professor who worked for the same trust that I was working for. And I can remember walking into the room, and he had a physiotherapist working with him, and he just took about 5 minutes of listening to me because obviously I was all worked up and thinking, this is my only chance to get somebody to listen to me. And he said, I know exactly what's wrong with you. And I was flabbergasted because I hadn't even sat down. And he said, it's just the way you hold yourself, your body position, you're very hypermobile. And then he went on to explain to me about EDS. And then it's very much not a new concept, but people are starting to become aware of this. And it does have its problems that it causes early osteoarthritis and so forth. And he said, but it's a self-managing condition, so you need to find out something that works for you. And I've always been quite an active person. So when he said, you really do need to try and do some exercises to protect your joints and strengthen the actual joints themselves. And that's what I started doing. And it did work. It did work for quite a number of years. But then unfortunately, I think my immune system sort of kicked in and I started having other problems. I'm also diagnosed having POTS. I have psoriatic arthritis. Oh God, the list goes on. If there was a horse, they'd have shot me by now. But management-wise, it's really difficult because everybody says you look so well. And I think that's a classic one. And I feel like screaming, yeah, I might look well, but inside some days, I just feel as if I'm just falling apart. Everything hurts or nothing's playing ball. You exercise and then you feel drained because you've done it, but you know that you have to do it because if you don't, it's actually worse. And I think probably that's the hardest bit. But I'm quite a motivated person, so I tend to push myself.
Mm. Right. Brilliant. Thank you for that. We'll go into some of the details in a second. That's really interesting. But actually, just one quick question. Forgive my complete ignorance. What does EDS actually stand for?
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Okay. Is that the person who discovered it or?
Oh, yes. If I remember correctly, it's two gentlemen, isn't it? Don't ask me for the year that they came up with it, but yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So, coming over to you, Taylor, just tell me a little bit about yourself and what condition are you struggling with?
Hi, yeah, my name is Taylor. As you said, I live here in California. Before I had a diagnosis, I was a working actress and did a lot of TV and film, and so I don't even know, you might even know some of the things I've been in, and then working in media and actually in podcasting as well. And so I eventually, like you do, just my husband and I thought it would be time to start a family. And I had a very, very, I guess, normal pregnancy. I had great prenatal care. And when I went to give birth, via C-section, pretty much everything went wrong. I delivered the baby and then started hemorrhaging and bleeding out. And it was very much a surprise to all of my medical team because all of my labs had been fine, things like that. And so I was rushed back into another emergency surgery, and it was so stressful. My doctor had to take a couple days off work trying to save me after trying to save me. It was like that dramatic. I did survive. I didn't wake up very quickly from anesthesia. They were really worried I wasn't going to make it, but luckily I did. Also, luckily, I had a really excellent medical team. A huge medical team, upwards like almost maybe even more than 20 physicians were working on me because one of the challenges of my case was literally almost every organ was being impacted. So I had kidney failure, heart failure, lung issues. They were concerned about my brain, and essentially everyone was like, what is happening to this poor new mom? And my nephrologist noticed I had really low platelets and was like, something is up. Like, we all thought she was just in shock, but her platelets are so, so low. And so he pulled in a hematologist who just happened to be like answering his messages on a Saturday and was like, I think she might have this very rare thing. And if she does, she needs this medicine right now. So the rare thing is called atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome, or complement-mediated thrombotic microangiopathy. Essentially, that translates to tiny, tiny blood clots that my immune system causes. So it gets a trigger and your immune system starts attacking your own cells, and that disruption causes tiny, tiny blood clots. But the problem with those tiny blood clots is there's so many, they clump together to cause truly seriously challenging blood clots. So I had blood clots all over my kidneys, in my heart, in my lungs, all over my pelvis, all through my baby's cord. And no one noticed previously. So who knows how, maybe it's the acupuncture I went through on my way in, but I was, in great shape. So it was truly, truly surprising. Luckily, I got the medication. My insurance didn't approve it. It's fun fact, one of the most expensive medications that exists. It can be between $100,000 to $700,000 a dose, depending on your insurance. And they were like, just give it to her anyways. We'll deal with it later. And so I wasn't even conscious. My husband approved it and they gave it to me. That saved my life. And a month later, I was able to get a biopsy on my kidneys and a full diagnosis. But if that doctor hadn't been checking his emails on a Saturday and willing to just be like, I think it's this thing. And if it's this thing, she needs this right now. And I would not be talking to you today and looking as healthy and normal as I am if it weren't for that doctor. I would say, just, anecdotally, I'm not like, just like Wendy, I look very fine, but I have half kidney function, and I was on dialysis for 9 months, and even the drug has its own challenges as far as pain and joint pain and all that thing. But I'm living as close to a normal life as someone with such a nasty rare disease as I got.
Yeah, wow, what a story. Just a quick question for you, actually. So, did it affect your child in any way, or was that completely separate?
That's a very good question. So, in the course of all of this, I didn't. I was genetically tested. There is a genetic test for this, and I came up idiopathic, so I don't have the gene. But it's interesting. The baby was healthy. Thank God. It's truly like a miracle because her cord was full of blood clots. Like all the pathologists were like, the baby's fine. She's great. She's healthy. But I do live sort of on the edge that she will flare at some point because, normally this is genetic, but there are a subset of cases, mostly that flare during pregnancy where oftentimes folks don't have the genes. So science needs to catch up to figure out what's really going on there.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Thank you. I tell you what struck me about both your stories was that it's pure chance that you received a diagnosis. So in Wendy's case, it's pure chance that you happened to meet this particular professor who obviously had some experience of it. And for you, saying a pure chance, as you said, and, kind of in a life-threatening situation, somebody saw their emails, which is, it's kind of worrying, really, isn't it? But it depends so much on luck. So I just want to come back to you, Wendy. The professor who diagnosed you, had he had much experience of this before? I mean, you said he could tell straight away by the way you were holding yourself. So how did he'd come across it before, presumably?
He didn't actually diagnose me with EDS. He just said I had hypermobility. But he mentioned the EDS, but like he said, that's very rare. But you're welcome to read up on it, he said to me. It doesn't change the treatment, doesn't change anything. There is no treatment, it's self-management. And what he didn't tell me was that there were, at that time, 7 different types of EDS. And he said, well, you just need to try and sort of maintain your joints and just keep them strong, stop them dislocating. Because the other thing that I never thought, because I wasn't having complete dislocations, they were just subluxations, that it was moving out of the proper where they meant to be, the joint capsule, but not enough so that they weren't functioning. And it was my hands that were particularly bad. And I'd always had trouble as a child with school holding a biro, pencil, drawing, things like that, because my hands used to hurt. They used to hurt so much. And everybody put it down to the point of having growing pains. And that was one of the first questions he asked me. As a child, did I have growing pains? And I said yes, to the point that I had several x-rays and they couldn't find anything wrong. And then it was several years later when I was... back in 2015, it was actually, where everything was coming to a head. My joints were getting more painful. I was extremely unwell. My skin was flaring up. I was getting all these spells. I was collapsing, nearly fainting. So many different symptoms. So I went to see a professor privately down in London. And the EDS criteria had only just been released about 9 months prior to that. And then one they were working on.
Wow.
So there was lots of tests involved that he would measure. He obviously had to rule out Marfan syndrome and a load of other musculoskeletal problems. So they also look inside your mouth because you get dental crowding. and so forth. So it was quite significant. And then he agreed with me because by then I did my own literature search. And he agreed with me, yes, you do have EDS. I've got no problem, he said, in diagnosing. But I would like, if you would consider it, pay to have genetic testing so that we can rule out in case you have one of the red forms, like the classical or the vascular form, which can be very life-threatening. So he did ask me about my bleeding history, and funnily enough, I was another one with a severe postpartum hemorrhage, to the point I remember passing out, asking to put my feet in stirrups and taking me down this corridor, and everybody else could see everything. It was that much of an
Oh my God.
emergency. And they just about saved my life as well. That's when I had a retained placenta. So when he was trying to remove the placenta, it was disintegrating in his hands. So obviously they wanted to test the children. Now, fortunately, my son, who I had the severe postpartum hemorrhage with, even though he thought other forms of the hypermobility, he's not exactly classic EDS either, because he doesn't get subluxations. He's had one, but it was under duress playing football. So, it's just the other little things, the eyesight problems, skin problems, and he has joint pain as well. But if you were to test his range of movement, you wouldn't classify him as hypermobile. It just goes to show the condition is actually more than the hypermobility. It's to do with the collagen structure. So yeah, and then my daughter, she is diagnosed EDS like I am, but she is a mirror image of me. So, it's probably strong genetics.
Right. Okay. Understood. So Taylor, tell me how you said you agreed with Wendy and you said, I look fine, but I'm not really inside, and people think I'm fine, but I'm not. So how does your condition affect your kind of day-to-day life, and what are the problems of living with it?
Well, it's a myriad things. I would say, the most sort of impactful reality is just having half kidney. It left my kidney so poor. Obviously I went from 0 kidney function to, trickling in kidney function. I'm one of the 1 to 2% of people who got to graduate from dialysis without getting a new kidney. So I'm very, very, very lucky. And so I have akin to the stage 3 kidney disease, which in some ways, is very on the surface, doesn't look like much. But, when it comes to labs, I have to be incredibly diligent. They test me pretty much once a month. But when I talk about my day of my living life, the hugest thing is just the level of fatigue is it's like a whole new world of fatigue. I feel like I used to be tired and then now I've got this, but I would say nothing prepares you for chronic illness like pregnancy. So I had pregnancy is exhausting, and I would say it was 9 months of exhaustion, and then I got this and I was like, I guess this is just my world. But I would say also, the drug I have is very powerful, and the side effects of the drug are sort of a tricky thing. Joint pain. I have a torn shoulder ligament, tendinosis. I went from being someone who would easily walk to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and out again to someone who, I'm very strong. And this year I actually do have some goals that are very physical, after sort of 2 years later. But, it's just the ease of that is incredibly challenging. But bit by bit, I get stronger and stronger. I would say, just like Wendy, you have to be proactive with the exercise and things like that. And additionally, with the drug, the week of the drug, one of the side effects is upper respiratory infection, which you don't think about that as being always impactful. But, having essentially a cold every month of your life is like kind of a bummer, right? So, just this like feeling of I went from what I would say an 8 out of 10 wellness to like, you know, 5 out of 10, which for me feels dramatic. But I still I would say like I chase around a 1-year-old, no matter how much orthostatic hypotension I have, But yeah,
Mm.
it's tricky. But I would say, at least for me, only 5% of rare diseases have a treatment. So it's touchy because you're like very, very grateful for this treatment because I'm alive. I'm talking to you. I wouldn't be here without it. But you're also it's like it's a complicated marriage, I would say. Where I'm happy to have it, but, it has its own impact.
Sure, understood. So sorry, you say you have the treatment once a month, is that right?
One treatment was every 2 weeks, and now I've graduated to a treatment version that's every 8 weeks. And so that's pretty much the pattern. And with that, I get my labs same time, and it's even one bad lab, you're like, "Ugh, here we go. Like, am I gonna flare again?" Things like that. So it always feels a bit like, um, just this impending, like, I wanna forget that I have a rare disease sometimes, and it really doesn't let you. Like, I'd love to be distracted from my rare disease every once in a while. Yeah.
Do you suffer from a rare disease, or do you know someone who does? If you do, I'd like to take a moment to point you in the direction of the Rare Disease Network. It's a private support group on Facebook where we bring together people with all sorts of rare diseases from all over the world. You'll find exclusive research and insights. You'll get the chance to ask questions to leading medical professionals, and you'll hear some engaging and inspirational stories from my growing community. There's a link to the group in the episode notes below. Why not click on that, and we'll see you there. Wendy, I wanted to come back to you. I just wanted to, you say your condition is self-managed, and you say there are exercises you can do, but I mean, tell me what you have to do in order to self-manage the condition.
Fortunately, as a nurse, obviously, I'm quite aware of the human body and how it works. One of the biggest problems is that in the human body, it has a domino effect. So if you've got one system that's not working properly, it impacts every other system in one way or another to different levels. Yes, but it can. Basically, the core treatment that I do is basically core exercises. So a lot of Pilates. I walk a lot. I really enjoy walking. If I wasn't registered blind, I'd actually hike a lot more. But there's lots of areas I can't go because I can't see well enough and I'd be a danger to myself. So I have to stick to places that I'm very much aware of where they are. So I'm independent in those areas. But yeah, you mentioned the Grand Canyon. I've been there. One of my biggest dreams is to actually hike rim to rim. Just getting somebody to come with me, that's the problem. Yeah. So I walk a lot. And I do yoga. Now, if somebody was to ask me, I think all three play a huge part. The Pilates keeps my core strong after walking, but the yoga, because you're having to hold positions, it really strengthens your joints. So it really does help with subluxations. It really does. And I'm also, I think I also believe in the concept of yoga. I believe in there's a wellness that comes from your inside. There's, energy inside your body. And if you can learn to channel that, then you can actually not cure the disease, but you can actually tamp it down, keep it contained so that it's not flaring. That's my best way of trying to explain it to people. Because if I don't do my exercises, then it will flare up, and then it can be so bad that I don't feel like getting up because I'm in so much pain. So I've learned that even on days where I don't maybe mentally want to do it, I have to, because if I don't, then my body will suffer. So it is a bit of a challenge. And you're talking about drugs. Now, unfortunately, because I've also got psoriatic arthritis, I'm on methotrexate, which is an immunosuppressant. So I'm extremely prone to picking up infections. And I'm saying, and I have asthma. At the moment, I've got an respiratory tract infection that I just cannot seem to budge. And you daren't mention it because COVID is everything. So, yeah, unfortunately.
Well, I was going to say, I'll totally walk to the bottom of the Grand Canyon with you, Wendy. We'll just have to go really slow.
When I'm hiking, I usually manage to do 5.5 miles an hour.
Wow.
That's how fast I walk.
Wow. I'll just ride the donkey behind you is what I'll do. But I agree. I have also like the drugs that they give us for these autoimmune disorders. They're powerfully immunocompromising, right? So living in a world with COVID, I mean, for me, the biggest one I have to watch out for with my drug is meningitis. Like if I even think that I maybe might have meningitis, they're like, go to that ER right now. Like, but it is tricky because, so many, especially I think the stats on women specifically having autoimmune disorders, it's pretty astounding. So yeah, it's a really difficult thing to have to constantly live on a drug that's telling your immune system to calm down. But again, I don't know about Wendy, but for me, my immune system's also trying to murder me. So it's tricky. know?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the around you. When you mentioned that the problems that your son and daughter have, but how does your own condition affect other members of the family? Does it affect them in any way?
No, to be honest with you, no, because I'm one of these people that even doesn't matter how unwell I feel, I carry on. I'm not doing myself any favors, I know, but I do tend to carry on. And I tend to carry on doing everything as per usual. I'll suffer for it, but I won't give in to it. And I know it's difficult, and I know we're all different people, but I really do feel sometimes that, especially having worked as a rehab nurse, that you do have to be hard on yourself. Yes, you have to learn to love yourself and to give yourself a rest. But if you wallow, if you self-pity yourself and you wallow and you just feel, oh, woe is me, it will take over your life and it will change things and it'll have an impact on your family. I personally like to think that it doesn't. I would argue my blindness affects my family more than anything because I'm so dependent on them if I need to go somewhere. We live in the middle of the island, which means that our nearest shop is 3 miles away. So, and it's not an option walking there, not the distance. It's too dangerous because I come onto a main road with no pavement. The nearest town is 8 miles away. So it does have an impact. My husband's not well himself at the moment, so he's still driving where we need to go places. But yeah, it is a bit of an issue. So I would argue, no, it's my blindness that actually affects my family more than my musculoskeletal conditions.
Understood. How about you, Tyler? How does your condition affect your family?
Well, for me, I think it's been in stages, right? I think a lot of my family experienced sort of a secondary trauma, after what happened to me at the hospital. I was at the hospital 5 weeks. I was on a ventilator 3 times. I was in the ICU 3 times. I also experienced uremia, where my kidneys failed and it poisoned my brain. And what they saw was incredibly traumatic. So I think in the first stage, it was dealing with how scary seeing me in those conditions was for them. And especially my husband as a new father, that was incredibly difficult. You go to the hospital to have a baby and you drive home alone because the baby didn't even come home with him because they were hoping that I would wake up and, get to meet the baby. And I had the baby on a Thursday and didn't meet the baby until I was conscious on a Sunday, the next Sunday. So, I think those experiences, were hugely impactful. And then I come home but I can't walk. I have dialysis. You basically had two people, an infant and me, that need constant care, in the house. And for me, it was so frustrating because all I wanted, like Wendy's is similar, is I wanted to do for myself, but I realized that I couldn't. I had to accept that I was a disabled mother, and motherhood looked different for me for a time. And my family kind of swirling around that, it was very impactful. They had to do a lot. And Zach, my husband, is a tremendous father. But I would say, you know, through all that challenge, his relationship with my daughter is truly, truly beautiful. They're so close in a way that I think is truly unique. In some ways, I would say, and I don't think you disagree, that he has the typical relationship that a mother often has with the child. And I'm sort of like the dad figure in a certain way, that's sort of atypical situation. Oftentimes on the weekend, I'm like, I'm gonna go take a nap. See you all in a few hours, and he's the one that gets up in the morning and makes the breakfast. So, but I would say luckily, things have sort of calmed down. I'm very stable. So, we in it right now, he's on tour. He's a musician. He'll be heading over to the UK soon. So, he'll be playing over there. He's over your way twice a year, pretty much. And so I'm by myself, single momming for quite some time now, and it's a challenge, but we're strong. I think when you get a rare disease, some people, again, speaking to Wendy's, sort of like trying to stay in a positive mind frame. I think a lot of people talk about PTSD, but I don't think enough people talk about post-traumatic growth. I think when you have these experiences, you can eventually be left with a certain degree of strength, of resilience, of being able to tackle challenges in a way that is uniquely profound. And I think that when you have a rare disease, whether you have it from childhood or whether it just erupts and you have to deal with it, I think if you're open to it, there's a profound level of strength that is accessible to you.
Would you agree with that, Wendy?
Yes, definitely. But it also is dependent on the personality initially. But yes, I think a lot of people with nursing rehabilitation, you do find there's very much a dividing line. You don't tend to get ones in the middle. You either get left or right hand side. And for example, maybe the left ones are the ones that will be extremely motivated, will say, I will get out of this bed again on my own. And then you'll have the other end that will say, well, that's it for me now. I'm only this age and look at me. That's it. Everything's gone. Physiotherapists start work, and then, people say, well, no, I can't do it. It's too painful. And it's very difficult to get those people to sort of push themselves beyond what they feel is acceptable. Like I said, we're all different. So we can't point fingers and say, you must do this. I try to educate. I'm on several Facebook groups. A common one in EDS is, I can't cope. My back hurts. Can't do this. Can't do that. I'm even more overweight than I was previously. And you feel for them, but every time you try and maybe give them a little bit of us to push, I find in today's society, they instantly take offense. And no, I've tried, I can't do anymore. So it gets a bit difficult. And sometimes I just find I just back off because there's no point. And I noticed the change when I was nursing, that people are becoming more, we've got a term for it in nursing now, whether it's appropriate or not, but we call it pajama paralysis. It's not exactly paralysis,
Right.
but there is a huge psychological effect in it that I'm in hospital, I've got a broken leg, but hey, my arms don't work either, therefore I can't possibly wash myself.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Pain,
Yeah.
pain is not in psychology. It's there for a reason. Obviously, excruciating pain is different. I think when you have a chronic illness, especially a rare one that where there's no treatment for it, you have to learn to get over that, and you have to learn to cope with the pain one way or another. And yes, it's hard and it hurts, but when you get yourself to a certain level of fitness, I think the endorphins, the adrenaline, everything tends to override it, and you don't get the same pain as you used to because you are physically fit. And if you're fit, your body holds
Correct.
itself. So there's not much strain on your
Yeah.
joints, on your periphery. So, but try and get people
Yeah.
to understand that, and it's really, really difficult. I find anyway.
I do think there is this piece that I think is really important is that when you get these diagnoses, especially mental health care is part of healthcare, right? Having, it's easy to sort of get depressed and you sort of start to tell, I see it and I've been there too, where like these narratives start running in your head, these negative narratives. And that's very, whether you're in a bad marriage or you have a rare disease, like sometimes these narratives, it's very hard to break them. And that's why I think when you have, a rare disease or any kind of chronic disease, especially, getting mental health care is crucial, because you can, I think, change the narratives like Wendy says, but it takes support. It's very hard to do it alone.
Right. Right.
I just think this day and age as well, there's so many things that people go and read on the internet. And I think it's a huge factor because, with the greatest respect, unless you do have some medical knowledge, people misinterpret a lot of information. And they can actually make it worse for themselves, because what happens then is they go to a GP or even to a consultant in a hospital. I think I've got this, and I think, and it won't. What makes you think that? And they go through everything. And then, but when they actually get examined, they find, well, no, that's not the case. But they have gone so fixated in their mind because, knowledge can be dangerous in the wrong hands and then actually cause more problems. I'm all for patient programs when we used to have an exploitation program. I'm all for them, don't get me wrong, as long as the information that they're reading is the correct information.
Right.
A lot of
Yeah.
people will read that if just totally, and then of course it doesn't help because at the moment in Wales, we have the Rheumatology Society has refused to see anybody with EDS. And the rheumatologists themselves have actually said, because they don't know enough about the condition. Well, the Rheumatology Society won't even actually acknowledge Ehlers-Danlos syndrome either. If you look into their list of diseases on their website, it's not listed. They won't acknowledge it. You see why patients are actually trying to help themselves, yes, but they're not helping themselves because it's causing this defense mechanism by the rheumatologist because they're not familiar. You've got this patient coming at you, it could bring in all these potential scenarios and all these potential things that can go wrong. And they're like, whoa, I know nothing about this. There's nothing I can do to help you. But they're also aware that what these patients have read is either to an extreme or doesn't exist altogether. So it's causing conflict. Now, the EDS Society themselves have been doing huge amounts of work recently. They've been trying to get as many doctors and consultants on board. They've got a GP toolkit. They've got a load of seminars and things like that they're trying to get people to actually attend so they can give the rheumatologist a good grounding of where to start. But what doesn't help is that because you've got several types of EDS, the type I have, which is the hypermobility type, there is no known gene mark for it. So with the other ones there's a gene for every single one type or subtype, but not for the hypermobile one. And unfortunately, the hypermobile type is the most common form. So the Genetics Society just said, you just said, no service, you just won't test anybody.
Yeah.
Because we're getting all these people asking to be tested, but we haven't got a for it. But say, fine, I'm not asking for you to turn on to say, I've got hypermobile EDS. I know that. What I want is for you to test in case that I have one of the more rare ones. So you can't get genetic testing on the NHS. You'd have to pay for it. Which I did for my daughter. I did. Running off to myself, say, well, hey, I've lived most of my, and I've managed. But I really would, for her benefit and for my grandson's benefit, so we test. Unfortunately, she just came back with there was nothing towards this type of mobile EDS. But yeah, it's a problem. It's a huge problem at the moment.
I was just going to say, as a quick side note, I do think the internet can be a place of both support and just like a mess. But, last year, it's almost a year, Rare Disease Month is in February. And on Valentine's Day, I started last year a Substack called Rare Disease Girl, where I write a lot about my journey, but also try to give tools to folks with rare and chronic illness. And one of the goals of that, blog for me is trying to give people tools to stay positive, trying to give tools that inspire and encourage folks to, I think there's a great quote, I'm going to mess it up, by Cheryl Strayed, that's like, you don't have the right to the cards that you think you should have been dealt, but you have to play the hell out of the cards that you have been dealt. So, trying to help reframe that, like, if this is your life, how can you play the hell out of the cards that you've been dealt? And that's just what I'm trying to do, and hope encouraging others to as well.
Well, that's a great note to finish on. We've probably overrun our time. That's been absolutely fascinating talking to both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences so openly. I really do appreciate that. And if you have enjoyed listening to this podcast, let us know. Tell us your thoughts about what you've heard and put them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well. Make sure you don't miss out. And if you know anyone else who might like to join in the conversation, then please do share the link with them. And you can also join the conversation on our Facebook group, which is called the Rare Disease Network. So Wendy, Taylor, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been absolutely lovely. Really pleased to meet you. And I wish you all both the very best in managing your disease and dealing with things in the future. Thank you so much for your time.